Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about percents. Now, I know a lot of you are saying this isn't a math class. What do I need to know percents for? Well, first of all, let's talk about myself. Me being a religious man, I pay tithing. Many of you have heard of that, having paid it yourself. When you go through and you look at it, remember the simple lessons you were taught growing up, where tithing is 10% of what you earn. How easy is it to do that? Well, you use a decimal point, right? If you've earned $100, in simple terms, that's 100.00. You're going to take and move that decimal point one space to the left. So instead of 100.00, it becomes 10.00. So that means your tithing is $10. So let's think about that real fast. 10% of $250 would be, moving that decimal point, $25. Well, what if in a month you earned $12,000? Let's come up with a fun number here. Whip out my pen. And let's say in any given month, and do it with me now, you earn $8,457.45. Okay? Doing the simple, move the decimal point with me, move it one to the left. That means you're going to pay 10% is $845.70 what? How do you do that? Is it 74 and a half penny? What I do is I always round up that very last number. So for me, it would be $845.75. Now, obviously, all of you can choose to do what you would like to do when you would like to do it. I know people who would have taken that $845 and they would have rounded it to the nearest dollar, so $850, right? It's entirely up to you what you want to do. But for me personally, that's how I do it. Now, when you're paying tithing and it's 10%, do you go off of gross or net? We're going to be talking about those terms a little bit later on. When else do you use percents? When I was in college, I told you guys growing up, I worked at an amusement park. I worked at a chicken fast food company. I worked doing construction. One of the many jobs I've had in my life throughout, when I got back from a mission in Romania, I did construction again, but I decided, you know what? I am going to earn tips being a waiter because I know I can make people happy. I know I have excellent service, right? And so I went out and I worked at a restaurant called Sizzler. Anybody eaten there? I love the all-you-can-eat shrimp and the steaks and the salad bar. And the place I worked at was actually down close to BYU, near a mall called University Mall. Right across the street on the west side, the Sizzler was right there. And when I worked as a waiter, we only got slightly over $3 an hour, which is nothing. You can't live off of that, right? And so I was never content with minimum wage. $3 was well below the minimum wage, but that's what waiters earned. So that's what you had to put on your taxes, right? Well, as a waiter, I lived off of tips. So I knew if I gave excellent service, I kept people happy, I made sure that their drinks were always full. If they got that all-you-can-eat shrimp, I always made sure to bring out big plates, and I would get very, very substantial tips. On the weekends, I'd work, there's a banquet room, and it could fit about 100 people. And so I would work in there, and, in the course of a couple hours, on a Saturday night, I'd come home with about $350. Now, I know that doesn't sound like a lot of money, but when you're in college, that's your bills, right? You work just Saturday nights, I could pay my bills for the month and make sure I could focus the entire week on school because that was important to me. Focusing on my schooling was absolutely crucial because I knew that the smarter I became, the better my earning potential became. So when figuring out tips though, how do we do that? How much do you pay? 30%? 20%? 15%? I had one old gentleman come in and he looked at me and he was a regular customer and he'd always joke with me. But he made the statement, John, if 10% is good enough for the Lord, it's good enough for you. So he only left me 10%. Well, if he got the lunch special at $4.99, that meant I only got a 49-cent tip. Not very happy about that, right? Always gave him excellent service though, and made sure he always knew that he was taken care of. So when we do it, the typical amount that you tip is 15%. So as you're going through and you're deciding as you're buying your food, always plan on having 15%, because that's how waiters survive. Remember I told you, as a waiter, I only got around $3 and something cents. I don't remember the exact end, but it was slightly over $3. Can't survive off that. They're working for tips, okay? It is not okay to go to a restaurant and not leave a tip unless your service was horrible. So when you're figuring out 15%, once again, real easy. So with me now, let's write down a number. Let's say you go to Sizzler, okay, and your total bill, now the tip is before tax. I want to make sure you understand that. So you look at the total price of what it cost you, and then they always add on tax, and that's your total bill. The tip is based on the initial amount, not including the tax. So let's say you take out your wife and your children in the future. So like myself, I know at any given time with my 3 children and my wife and myself, we're probably going to spend, let's say, $57, okay? Now it's real easy to get 10% off of that. Moving the decimal like we talked about, that would be $5.70, right? Well, then you take the 5% would be half of that, okay? So what's half of 570? Where's my math majors here? So that would be $2. Do some math with me. And 85 cents. So take 570 plus 285. 15, 5, 6, 7. So if I've done my math correct, that's $8.55. So you would take the $57 plus $8.55, and then you'd have your total amount you're paying. Okay. Now me personally, the way I like to tip is it's not 15%. I would look at my bill. I'd say it's $57, and I would probably just add $10 to it. I know that's more than 15%, but if my waiter or waitress is good, that's what I'll do because they've earned it. Because I know what it's like to work for tips, okay? If someone's really bad, I still tip them, but I don't tip them well. If my food was horrible, I'll talk to the manager. But never forget, the food is not the waiter or waitress's fault. The food is the cook's fault. The waiter or waitress needs to make sure you are taken care of, though. If they don't top off your drinks. So 15%, that is the average, okay? Same thing when you're getting your car parked by a valet, 15%. If you have someone delivering something to you, say a pizza to your house, they live off tips as well, 15%. I know that some pizza delivery men, every Friday night, my family, we do pizzas and a new movie. Whether that be a movie that's streamed online or on cable, or we go out and we buy a new movie, that's a family tradition, and my kids look forward to it every single week. Sometimes we go out and get the pizza, sometimes we have it delivered. But it always makes me sad when I see a pizza delivery man who is thrilled that I tipped him. You should. That's part of the cost. If you're going to do it, then you need to be responsible and tip these individuals. Another percent we need to talk about is sales tax. So my son last summer was so excited. He wanted a new mountain bike. So he was mowing lawns. We did extra chores to where in my house the way we do allowance is you don't just get money. You have to work for it. You guys probably have learned that right now about Brother Stevens, right? You get what you work for, okay? Like in the old days when you hunted, did you get free meat? Would the bear just kind of lay down and say, oh, okay, I'll die now, eat me so you can feed your family? No. You had to strap on your boots. You had to go out there, whether it was rain or snow or sun, and you had to go out and kill the meat, grow the fruit, grow the vegetables, harvest to be able to eat. So there's a saying I like to say, you eat what you kill, okay? So in that mantra, when I talk to my loan officers, my employees, you eat what you kill, okay? So as you're going out and about, my son, with his allowance, that's what we do. If he cleaned up the dog poops, well, you know what? He got paid X amount. If he didn't do it, he doesn't get paid, And there are certain chores he has to do. So just like a job, you show up, you have your job, and then to get a bonus, you got to go above and beyond. No one deserves a bonus, okay? You have to go above and beyond. So as he was sitting there and earning his money and understanding if he did more work, he got more money, his end goal was an awesome black mountain bike. And it was a lot of money. Well, he worked really hard, spring, summer, fall, and at the beginning of fall, he had finally earned enough money for the sales price. And then he forgot he had to buy a helmet, right? Because he wanted a new helmet. He had helmets and bikes from us before, but this was the cool, awesome, hey, I'm cool bike helmet. And then he had sales tax. And I remember how sad he was that he realized he'd have to work a lot more to get that. So this was a teaching moment for my wife and I. We went in, we actually ended up helping him, and we paid the sales tax, and we helped him. And because he had worked so hard, we bought him the helmet as well, and the other accessories, a bike lock and things like that. But when you go and buy something, never forget that there's sales tax on top of it. So every state varies if you buy something. So every single state. But you need to make sure that when you're doing the calculations that you add it in there. Okay? So let's say, just to make it easy for you, and let's say the sales tax is only 5%. So if my son, once again, let's write it down together. If my son buys a bike that's $120, okay, and he has sales tax of 5%, let's do some simple percents here. What's 10% of $120? That would be $12, right? 5% is half of 10, so that means that sales tax would be $6. So not a lot of money, but sales tax goes towards helping communities, goes towards helping counties and states, and the nation in general. So depending on where you do it. In Pennsylvania, there's a 6% sales tax, okay? And the way you do that, that's pretty hard. 6%? How do I figure that one out? Simple math again, okay? So if 10% you move the decimal one space, what's 1%? You move it twice, okay? So once again, we figured out 10% of 120 was $12. So half of that, 5%, was $6. So we know what 5% is. To get to 6%, you had to have 1% more, right? So take $120, move the decimal twice to the left, and that leaves $1.20, okay? So 5% is $6 plus 120. Your sales tax off a $120 purchase at 6% is $7.20. Pretty easy, right? Your parents, your neighbors, your friends are going to be amazed at all these amazing things. The next thing you need to know about percents is when you go out and you figure, I want to make sure I'm not covering anything else in a future class here. When you're paying your bills, and we'll talk about shopping later on. That's the one thing I want to make sure we're not covering right now. When you're paying your bills, you need to make sure that you understand, if I paid up front, how much savings do I have versus if I add interest over time. Because there are some bills that say, listen, if you don't pay the full bill, then we're going to charge you interest over time. We've already talked about credit cards and interest. We'll do another class on that more in depth. But say it says net 30, 1%. That means if you pay your bill this month, say it's a $10 bill, okay, then you only pay, let's actually do some bigger numbers here. Let's say your bill's $100. And in net 30, they're going to increase it by 1%. Okay? Then that means if you pay it off before the 30, then you're paid in full. But if it's a 1% after that, then you're going to increase it every single month. So please make sure as you're doing these things that you understand fully, pay your bills on time. Make sure when you're out there, you're tipping appropriately those who give you good service. If it's poor, round it down, give them less. And then make sure as you're going through in sales tax, as you're saving your money to buy something, a car, that's a big one. Sales tax is very expensive on that. In fact, let's talk about that real fast because the numbers we were talking was pretty low. But let's say you have a 6% sales tax on an automobile, okay? In fact, let's make it easy. Let's say it's just 5%. And you go out and you buy that brand new Ford, and it's $47,000. Okay. 10% is 4,700, right? So let's take 4,700, divide that by, 5% is half of it. So what's half of that? That's $2,350. Do you want to pay interest on that? Do you want to pay it up front? Find a good deal when you're buying a car. Sometimes at the end of the year, they'll pay your sales tax for you. There's always good deals out there if you look for it. And there's nothing wrong with finding a good deal. Thank you so much.